Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Parenting is Easy, Said No Never. I am your host, Hanani Abraham, and I am so excited for you guys to listen to an amazing talk that I just had with Avigail Gimpel, who is a ADHD expert. This topic really resonates with me personally as something that I know I've gone through. I've gone through it with some of my kids, and she really gets down to what we are supposed to be doing. What are our roles as parents and as educators when it comes to dealing with a child with ADHD? We talk about the different types of ADHD, how it might manifest itself in the home, within sibling relationships, within the school relationships, how to talk to a school. There are so many things that we talk about over here regarding also the building resilience within children, teaching life skills and habits to children with ADHD, and how does that differ with kids that are dealing with ADHD, and then the siblings of those dealing with ADHD. Where faith comes into play over here as well when it comes to having children with ADHD. I think in general, this topic, I got to say, is something that is I'm so happy to have this conversation with her. It was a really long time coming, actually getting this conversation recorded, and I'm so glad that we did. I hope you guys enjoy listening as much as I enjoyed recording. So there's so many places to go when it comes to talking about ADHD, Abigail. I'm curious if we just, start from the beginning regarding parents understanding the basic understanding of what ADHD is and what they should be looking for or seeing within their child to even bring it up to a doctor, to a school or something. We start from the beginning and just talk about the basics of what ADHD is.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's go from there. So ADHD is a list of symptoms. Start from hyperactivity to more of the dreamy type of kid. The kid who's going to be distracted in class, have trouble cleaning his room or her room, and having trouble getting started on things and stopping things. I call that the start-stop mechanism. Having trouble with follow-through. They start a lot of projects and don't get them done. Generally have some issues with tact, or socially they struggle a lot socially. There are many symptoms, and the reason I call it, and that's something that you can easily look up online. The DSM-5 has a lovely list of all the different symptoms of inattentive and hyperactive. The reason I call it a list of symptoms is because it's important for parents to know that just because your child has some of those symptoms or many of those symptoms, like my children, all of them have many of the symptoms, that does not mean that your child's ill. That does not mean that you need to panic. That means that you're seeing something and it's worrying you, and you need to find out why.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I think that that's sort of just as a parent myself, being able to just realize, okay, just because my child is showing certain signs of things doesn't necessarily mean that there's an issue, so to speak. But at the same time, there are a lot of symptoms that can show up in so many different ways, and I think the way it manifests in every child is going to be different. At what point should a parent start questioning regarding, okay, should I be doing something? Are there interventions for where my child is at, for what they need? At what point do you see that as something that should be brought to a higher level of attention?
Well, I think everybody nowadays has a little bit of ADHD. Would you agree with me?
Oh, yes, 100%.
You carry this nasty little thing in your pocket, and we're all ADHD a little bit. When do we worry about it? When it really gets in the way of our functioning. So if your kid is a little bit all over the place in class, but yet manages to get decent grades and still has friends and is not being tactless all over the place and is like getting done what they need to get done, then okay, so we're all a little bit distracted. Some of us within our hyperactivity do okay. As a classroom teacher, I used to have some of my students stand during the lesson, not as a punishment, as a way of like, you have a lot of energy. If you need to stand up next to your desk instead of sitting and you learn better that way, go for it. That's fantastic. Or even like juggling a little bit or walking around on a figure eight. If the kid could do that and is functioning great, leave it alone. If they're constantly failing, or if they can't get along with anybody, have no friends, are fighting with everybody at home, and it doesn't even have to be all of these. Even one of those, a child is just not succeeding at school, feeling terrible about his or herself, and is just feeling like there's no end to their suffering, and why should they be in school, and school is stupid and all that. Or if at home it's intolerable in terms of their behavior, definitely seek help. I wouldn't say necessarily that the doctor's office would be the first place I would go at this point because I'm well into my journey. But that's where we're recommended to go. But I would say there are a lot of things that we would want to do prior to the doctor's office. But I'm sure we'll get more into that as we have our conversation.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. So there are a few things from you said that are said over there. I want to unpack. So we talk about things at home and things are unraveling in a certain way. Can you just expand on that a little bit? Are we talking specifically, let's say, between the parent and the child's relationship, maybe the child and other siblings at home, or maybe the child and themselves? Could you explain a little bit what you mean by like how things are unraveling at home?
So I had a funny conversation with my 16-year-old son the other day because he hears everything that's going on in the kitchen. And I was mentioned to my husband that I was working with a particular family where the parents were afraid of their child, meaning the child was extremely aggressive and off the handle, really. Just, would take paint and just, and start painting up the walls of the house or a hammer and start smashing the walls of the house. Really, really difficult behaviors. And the child was managing to get between the two parents and dividing and conquering. And they never knew what to expect. The child could start screaming in the middle of the night and wake up all the other siblings. And the parents were constantly holding their breath. And a lot of them, my son says to me, well, that's ridiculous. How could a parent be afraid of their child? And I said, well, a parent has to learn also leadership. A parent has to learn that they're in charge. So a lot of times we have this role reversal that we're seeing between parent and child. And the role reversal looks like the child's now in charge and the child gets to dictate how the parents respond. So that's one major issue. And in that case, we're not running to the doctor's office. We're getting help in terms of the parent learning to be the master of the home and taking back the car keys. And you also have situations where siblings are not getting along with each other. A child is particularly aggressive and insulting, either with their mouth or with their hands, or with the not being able to have proper boundaries. This is my room. This is your room. This is my bed. This is your bed. And that also causes crazy havoc in the house, and definitely needs to be looked at, and there needs to be help there, because while we're trying to help a child who's having issues of anger or aggression or whatever it is they're going through, we certainly do not want to have an environment where there are victims.
Got it. Okay, I think that paints a picture. If that story wasn't relatable in all ways, I think in some ways, the concept where you're talking about can really resonate with a lot of us. Now, how about school? And we talk about over here a lot in this room about school is not just about the grades, and there's a lot more to school than the grades that your child's coming home with. But I'm curious from the ADHD perspective, are there questions or things that we should be looking out for when we hear from reports from teachers or maybe from other parents or from the principal regarding how ADHD is manifesting itself within our child? It's something that needs another intervention.
Yeah. So the main issue that I would say, honestly, I think since COVID, the reason we send our kids to school is to socialize. Apparently they could learn online or not, whatever. ADHD kids cannot learn online. So if your kid completely crashed and burned during COVID, welcome to the club. But the social aspect is major. So lower elementary school, as long as you're learning to read, to write, basic skills, you're doing okay. And grades are not very important at that point. And essentially, kids can catch up very quickly in a short amount of time. Like over a summer, kids can learn what they would learn in an entire curriculum all year long. I don't know if that's sad or happy, but it just is what it is. But what I always am concerned about is kids committing social suicide. And that's something that we see a lot with kids with ADHD symptoms, that they don't know how to relate. They're either over aggressive. They're a lot of fun, a lot of these kids, especially the ones that are more on the hyper side, because they're very much willing to take risks and they have great ideas and they get the kids to follow them. And they're the ones leading the games. They're awesome. And then they get out in their own game. And that's it. They blow the entire thing up and there's no one to talk to and nobody wants to play with them after a little while. That's a disaster. Also, the kids who are quiet and shy and don't really know how to engage with the social environment. Those are things I'm way more concerned about than grades. I'm also concerned about kids not being able to have basic understanding of the structure of organization in the classroom, as well as the structure of learning in a classroom. You need to take certain things out. So if they can learn that in younger elementary school, then when they finally kick in and become interested in learning, because kids with ADHD symptoms very often really have to be interested in what they're learning in order to get them going. So they're this instant gratification thing going on. So once they do actually come alive and they're like, oh, I like this stuff, this is interesting. If they have the skills, then they're okay. But if they're not gaining those skills, that's another thing I'm concerned about.
Can you talk a little bit more about those skills regarding how they can, I guess you could say, enjoy school a little more, if that's even possible for kids, but how us as parents can work with or train or teach these skills in a way where kids can become more interested and stay curious and learn a subject that they might not be that interested in, but it still is important for them, or they're able to go ahead and be a part of that social setting within the school system.
So it is really, really hard for kids with ADHD symptoms to stay engaged when they're not interested. And on the one side, that's amazing because these kids are going to do incredible things in this world because they're only going to engage in things that are interesting to them. And they're going to be inventors and scientists and tour guides and all sorts of other incredible stuff. They're the entrepreneurs. But trying to get them through very, very boring math. I always use math as an example because it tortured me. So let's say getting them through that class is very hard to get them through staying interested. And it also, the grade in the future, and 3 weeks from now when you have a test, and half a year from now when you have a report card, it's not going to cut it for them. It doesn't keep them interested. They couldn't care less. They can care theoretically, but right now it's too much torture and they don't want to hear from you. So what I do often with these kids is I do a behavior program where there is built-in rewards, daily rewards. So it's not the actual math that's keeping them going. It's the fact that they're going to get a reward at the end of math class. So then they want that reward. And if we can get them to sit through math class for a month, for 2 months because of the external reward, and then we taper down that external reward, which we must do because we cannot, we're not a transactional kind of a relationship, the teacher or the parent. We're not, That's not the relationship we want with them. But we taper that back. By then they have a habit of sitting through an entire class. The same thing with a kid who's very disorganized. I remember one of my daughters, when I went into the PTA meeting, the teacher looks at the classroom and with a deep sigh says, "Can you guess which one is your daughter's desk?" Yes, I can. The one with a big giant mountain on it. Now, her bedroom, I helped her organize skills for cleaning her bedroom, but they hadn't done that in the school. That's another skill that teachers can help with, even using a chart as well, dividing. Okay, we're talking about first your desk, then the floor around your desk, then your backpack, then your cubby. 4 points that you can get every day until the child learns the skill. Because our kids with the ADHD, they learn skills slowly, not because they're less intelligent. Often they're more intelligent, but they're not doing things that are boring. And what's more boring than routine? So whereas everybody else sits through the first grade training, we take the book out, we take the pencil out, they're off someplace else entertaining themselves in their own brain or actually physically jumping around entertaining themselves. And therefore, they're not gaining those skills. So we have to start at the bottom and help them gain those skills. And when they do get it, they will get interested. And I hear from a lot of my high school clients that there was the classes that they got 100 in, and there was the classes that they couldn't stand and never went into. The only way that they got 100 in those classes is because they had some skills. But if they get interested in high school and yet don't know how to take out a pen, a notebook, a book, not lose it, keep their desk organized, and remember to follow the classroom decorum rules, then they're not going to get the 100 even when they are interested.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And as you're talking, I'm already thinking both for some clients and also for some of my kids of how to deal with certain things. And the thing that's coming to mind is, I guess, say resistant to that chart. And I get the eye roll a lot, or at least from one of my kids, like, oh, another chart, here we go. And it does
Right.
work that in a certain way, but I think there's also a resistance sometimes when it comes to the charts, and especially if it's coming from someone, i.e., a principal, that might not be on the best of terms with a child. I'm curious, as parents, how we can work with that, but if let's say in situations where the chart is not going to work so well, what else can parents do that can be of benefit to this type of situation?
So that's a great question. And I actually had a fabulous conversation with my daughter. Just yeah, we had a lot of great conversations with my kids this week. My daughter last night. Now I did a lot of charts with the kids, and I have an entire chapter on charts in my book. And that's something that actually I did not expect parents to love that chapter because to me it felt a little bit tedious in terms of little details of how you set it up. Parents love it because it gives them this sense of calm, like, okay, now I know what to do. My students love it. Everybody really enjoys the very, very detailed instructions of what to do. But within that chapter, I have a group of children that are called the chart refusers. And one of my daughters was a chart refuser. And we were laughing last night with her husband about how she used to pull the chart down and tear it up into 150 little pieces and storm off. And I'm not doing this chart, stupid chart, and all that. So, yes, there are chart refusers. And what we need to understand is that we don't need to break them to start loving charts. We need to understand that this doesn't work for their soul. And
Right.
my daughter was explaining to me last night, but after she thought it through years later, why it didn't work for her soul. And
Mm.
she felt like for her, like getting the compliment when she did the right thing on the chart, it felt fake to her. It felt controlled. And she wanted to just get compliments because she was great. And she is great. But she just felt that there was too much control in that and she just didn't want to have anything to do with it. That's fine. There are other children who don't like the chart because we're not preparing the chart properly. We're either dumbing it down too much or we're putting too much on there and we're expecting the child to get done too much. And for example, let's say I want to really upgrade my lifestyle. I want to, go to exercise and diet and have my house perfectly clean all the time so that I have peace of mind. I want to do all that. I can't do it all at once or everything collapses. But very often our charts are an all at once thing. I want this kid behaving from the moment he gets to school at 8 o'clock to the moment he leaves at 3:30. And so we have to check out why the chart's not working. And are we doing the chart with somebody that the kid doesn't really trust right now? In which case, okay, time to find a different adult that has a good rapport with the child, but we're never manipulating the child into participating in the chart. We're checking the environment, we're checking ourselves, and then we're seeing, okay, is there a possibility of carrying on with the chart? Because I like the chart, it's organized. The kids usually like it unless they have these issues. If not, we have what's called an agreement, something that we do day to day instead of having a chart for each day, each time that you're accomplishing this task, then you're going to get that feedback that you're looking for instead of something written down. And my daughter actually said that she liked that because then it was living in my head. And in her head, she was succeeding just because she was succeeding. And that really worked for her, which is super interesting. It's great. We have to check in with our kids and ask them these questions. They're so fascinating, our children.
Right.
So that's another thing. Often also there's one other issue that we have to look at, which is that sometimes a kid does not want the chart because they're too emotionally overloaded. And because of their emotional overload, that's really the reason why they're not getting to developing these habits. There's something else going on. If a child's resisting the chart and we check these things, that the chart is good, that they can trust the adult, and all the other issues that we want to look at, that we're being consistent with the chart, that the child has the prize that they want, and we check that and it's all working, we've got to go a little bit deeper and figure out what the emotional trigger might be.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And I think the biggest thing I'm taking away from what you were just saying is communicate with our child, communicate with our children regarding what's
Yeah.
happening. How is this working? A acronym we talk about here on this podcast a lot is ABC. Always be curious, and just keep that in mind. That if there's something
Dedicated
happening,
life, second book. Curiosity,
Oh,
by
right.
the way.
Okay. Oh, I did not know that. But the concept of just, okay, why is this not working, and breaking things down, and on charts. I know something that, working in a school a long time ago as well. Something I learned when it comes to charts is that there's a chart, and then there's the perfect chart. And I think the perfect chart can be very dangerous for a child. Having the concept of needing to score a 7 out of 7 for the day in their behaviors. I think there has to be a sense of flexibility. And I think with our children, when it's something that we're trying to do at home, something we're trying to do at school regarding their behaviors, or handing in homework, or doing certain curricular stuff within the structure of the school, being able to have some leeway in what they need to do, where it's not going to be a perfect score, because there is no such a thing as being perfect. And we're trying to progress and to make progress in whatever it is that we're doing, and it doesn't happen overnight. And even in the world of sports, or in the world itself, there is no such thing as perfect. So why would we want that for our
I'm so
children?
glad you bringing this up. Oh my goodness. This is a major topic for me, the perfect thing, because that's a lot of, I work mainly with the parents. And the reason often that the parents are struggling so much was because they were told that they had to be perfect. And then you cannot be a perfect parent. As a matter of fact, I always tell new parents, understand that mistakes are baked into the cake. You're not going to be able to avoid mistakes. So the question is, as a growing, learning parent, what are you going to do with that?
Mm.
Are you going to take that as, I want to grow from my mistakes, and the mistakes are supposed to happen, and therefore, what am I supposed to learn from it? Or is it going to crush you each time? Because there is no perfect. Only God is perfect. And other than God, we are always on a journey. And those people, and honestly, I meet with people who are older adults who are still not satisfied with life. They're still struggling, and because they're still trying for the perfect vacation. So let's say it rained. What are you going to do then? It rained. Now it's all messed up. Or, wow, it's really fun to jump in puddles. I love
Exactly.
that. So my goal in life is to put myself on a journey all the time, to help my children be on a journey, and everybody I encounter, really, through my book, through any other conversation. If we're not in a journey, then we cannot possibly accomplish anything, because we're always in a state
Right.
of frozenness or disappointment.
Right. So there are a lot of things you touched on over there that we could really get into. I don't want to get too far off topic over here, but I think us as parents, I think something that we've suffered from, even without realizing it, is something that I like to call either learning or school trauma. And it's something that we've been through in some way, that has ingrained into our brains regarding needing to be a certain way. And if I need to be this way, so obviously this is what my kids need to be as well. And then we go down this like unhealthy rabbit hole of having to try to make expectations that should never even be there in the first place. But yet something that, what do you mean? We have to do things in a certain way. But I digress a little bit, because I think it's a topic that you and I could probably talk about for a long time over here. But going back to this topic of both charts and having a certain structure, and I know there's a difference between structure and boundaries, but I want to talk about that in like one question over here. And I think it's very important to have a certain level of structure when it comes to parenting, when it comes to how we're going to be raising our kids at home, but at the same time also respecting the ADHD child. And I'm curious, that balance of respecting what the child is going through, but yet also trying to have a certain level of structure or boundaries within the home of how we go about doing things. What would be a healthy balance that us as parents can think about or try to implement when it comes to the ADHD child, realizing that they are awesome and they're special, but yet we also have a way we want to do things at home?
Okay, so this is an interesting question, because parents often feel that because the kid is diagnosed with ADHD, they should lay off a little bit, that they should let the kid just flow. There's no one who needs more structure than a kid with ADHD symptoms. They need structure, more than strong structure, not structure where we're not allowing them to breathe, but rather they need more clarity than anybody else, because for a few reasons. Number one, due to their instant gratification personality, they're living on the edge constantly. They're always trying to reach for something that's a slightly more dangerous, slightly more daring. A lot of them, and that this is less. This is more the hyper kids and less the more inattentive kids. But they are definitely on that edge. and they don't know where to stop. And they need our help there. They need the reminder. We can say this to adults. We can't say this to adults. We can go out in the evening. We have to be home by 10. They need those boundaries because they don't have them naturally. It's not built in. They also, I always say that I wish my kids were born with like a little bit of fear. Fear would have been great. Um, my son calls me this morning from Syria, from like inside of they were taking care of some war stuff, and I'm like, oh my God, that's so dangerous. He's like, Mom, please knock it off. Everything's fine over here. I'm like, could you please be a tiny bit scared sometimes? But they don't have fear. There's a lot of lack of fear, and not only that, that because they're always pushing boundaries, it creates a sense of fear because they don't know where to stop. And they don't have anyone telling them, okay, you've gone far enough. That's it. Well done. You've investigated, you've researched, you've gone all the way to the end of this hike, and now we need to stop and get home now. And they need that so much. As a matter of fact, my son actually once said to me that he was at a friend's house and he came home and he said, my God, I'm worried that my friend's parents don't love him. So that's an interesting thing to say. What makes you say that? And he says, well, the kid was misbehaving and out of control and hitting his siblings and yelling, and the mother didn't stop him. She didn't say, you can't behave that way in our house. She was saying, in my son's mind, it's like, she doesn't believe in him. She doesn't think he could do better. Yeah. So we definitely, and in terms of structure and giving our kids that balance, we want to have clear rules in the house, and we want to have very clear consequences. And when I say consequences, what I mean is a huge compliment when they follow the rule and a punishment when they don't. But we're always leaning toward the huge compliment when they follow the rules, because it cannot work with a kid who's instant gratification that we just give punishments when a kid breaks the rule, because then the punishment becomes their prize because they want our feedback. So therefore, we have to be consistent there as well, and way leaning to the positive side, which is what they're craving.
So the two biggest things I'm taking away from what you're saying is to not give up on those boundaries. If anything, emphasize them even more when it comes to the ADHD child, because that's really, really important to make sure that they're getting what they're supposed to. But at the same time, to make sure that boundary is not made out of cement, but made out of some sort of rubber that does have a little bit of bend, because they're not going to be able to do everything all the time the way you want them to, or maybe even the way they want to. And just because of what they're going through, to be able to be there with them in what they're going through and help them in what they're trying to accomplish. So if it's, let's say, having to clean their room, but for some reason today is just the symptoms are just like times 10. And the way things are inside their body are just not of the regular Tuesday. So, how we go about dealing with that, we have to keep in mind and be mindful for ourselves as parents that, all right, she's going through something. So it's not just about, of course, she has to clean her room if she wants to do A, B, and C, but let's just have a little leeway. I might have to help her a little bit more, give her a little bit more time. It doesn't have to be a score of 100 if we're going to check her room. It has to be a little bit of a leeway, which is, I think, is important when it comes to dealing with this. The way I like talking about that is we want to be more like palm trees and not like pine trees, because palm trees will be a little bit more flexible when it comes to the winds that might come unexpectedly. And pine trees, and as beautiful and as firm as they are, they're not as flexible and they crack. And we don't want that to happen. So, I think that's something that I think is really important for us to have a very, very strict boundary, but yet also be flexible with it, so that we're helping the child and we're not putting them in a situation where they feel like they can't accomplish, which I think is really, really important. Talking about things that we're trying to do to help them. I'm curious, when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to food, and not just vitamins, but in general, are there certain foods that you would recommend or you've seen that can be more beneficial if kids either have and add to the diet, or maybe they should be staying away from in order to keep the symptoms a little more controlled?
All right, so let me give you a little bit of a broader answer on that, because the way I look at ADHD, as I said before, it's a list of symptoms, and what we're looking for is the root cause of those symptoms. So there are many different root causes of symptoms. We talked about instant gratification personality. We could talk about a kid who is addicted to screens, indoors all the time, not getting any exercise, not getting any nature. That's usually a bundle that comes together. We can talk about kids going through trauma, abuse, neglect, or things like that. And another big topic that we haven't touched on yet, which is exactly where you walked me right into, is the diet. If we see that a child is dealing with something physiological, and besides for the physiological issue, and I'll give a couple of examples, they're also dealing with ADHD symptoms, we have to look at the things they're dealing with. Like, for example, chronic runny nose, a kid who had to have tubes in their ears because they got, ear infections so often, strep throat, born by C-section, a kid who has headaches, stomach aches, all of those things, or any autoimmune condition, asthma, allergies. When kids have any of those kind of symptoms, then we want to turn to the gut. We need to do some gut repair. I have a whole chapter on that. It's actually downloaded for free on my website. And that gives you a full kind of rundown of what kind of diet you would have. Am I putting every single kid on that diet? No, I'm not. It's challenging. We're taking out gluten, we're taking out dairy, we're adding probiotics, we are adding tons of fruits and vegetables. So there's a full picture there, and I'm only giving you a couple of points here. But we're definitely at probiotics for sure. I think everyone should take them at least for 2 months out of every year just to get your gut in good solid order. But I added kids who have constipation, who have trouble sleeping. Those I love giving them magnesium because it works magic. Especially, and for little kids, you put them in an Epsom salt bath every night, 2 cups of Epsom salts in a bathtub. That's magnesium as well. That helps with the sleep, which is massive because kids who don't have enough sleep also have ADHD symptoms. That's another root cause that we have to be looking at. And therefore, to really get the proper care for your child, you want to be curiously, just like you said, looking at the full child, not just looking at a checklist of symptoms, because a checklist of symptoms, just like a tight chest, God forbid, that could be caused by many different things, and a sore throat can as well. These behaviors are a manifestation of something. And if we call the behaviors a disorder, then we're missing the child. And that's unacceptable, in my opinion.
I think that's such an important point that you said. And hopefully, I think that's, if someone was taking notes here, hopefully they underline that last thing you just said regarding the behaviors. And I think that's really important. Now, obviously, besides for nutrition, I think another topic that we said we're going to come back to and to talk about is medication. Okay. And as a parent that has 2 children that have been diagnosed with ADHD, and also being a psychotherapist, I have my own, I guess you could say, biased opinions when it comes to making sure that our kids are on the right medications, and even if they should be taking medications, and probably when they should start taking medications as well. So let's start there. At what age should parents start inquiring to see if medication should be an option, and how should that be approached to their pediatrician?
Okay, so according to the American Psychiatric Association, we do not medicate under the age of 6. I think that's too young. Kids' brains are developing fast, and to medicate a first grader seems to me like you're starting the first grader out at a major disadvantage. In terms of when we begin, in my opinion, again, and I spent a lot of research, it's not really an opinion. My second book covers that topic really in depth, putting it the wrong way. That's Show Me the Science. That is, I really wanted to understand, because I'm, as a mother of 6 children, 5 at least who have been diagnosed with ADHD. And the only reason 6 has not been diagnosed is because I just stopped checking. At some point, I'm like, okay, I got it. Thank you very much. But I did medicate 3 of my children at different times. And then I started really getting into the research, because I was trying to understand what was going on. Was my kid missing methylphenidate? Like, was there a Ritalin disorder, like that they didn't have enough Ritalin in their brain? And it turns out you don't actually have Ritalin in your brain, and methylphenidate doesn't belong in your brain. But it's really what I discovered with my research, and keeping in mind that I did not have a bias in either direction. I was actually medicating my children at the time. What I discovered was that in terms of scientific evidence that there's something wrong with the child's brain, the evidence is awful. There's nothing there that you can really hold on to. If you really read through I'm a nerd a little bit, so I read the full research instead of just the headlines. You're also a nerd. Okay, that's nice. Maybe that's why we could converse so easily.
Right.
But I would definitely say that knowing that the child's brain is not broken, and this is not like putting on glasses, and it's not something missing for your child that you're then putting into their brain to complete something, since that's not the story, even though that's the story being told when we are given this medication to give to our child. Therefore, we have to really make an assessment, because short term, the medication definitely has a lovely effect. Long term, there are some major risks. Keeping a child on it for more than a year, more than 2 years, it starts affecting the brain more permanently. So therefore, the question is, are we kicking the can down the road? Are we getting them to sit nicely in third grade and fourth grade, but then, God forbid, landing up with a depressed child or an anxious child in high school or beyond, because it starts to affect the brain? So it is, I think the way we need to look at these pills is not if should I medicate or not. It's a matter of, it's a tool like any other. Just like antibiotics, when you have the infection, you need to take the medication, but you don't take it for the rest of your life. That's something that we have to realize. Doctors are going to put your child on the medication and then keep them on it. That's it. That's the intervention. And that can't be the intervention, because ADHD has a source. There's a reason why your child's struggling. And therefore, you really need to figure that out. And if you're using this medication as a Band-Aid, or a plaster, as they say in the rest of the world, we're using it as a Band-Aid. It's a great Band-Aid. The kid's going to stop bleeding. They're going to stop bleeding emotionally, socially, for a short amount of time. If we rely on that Band-Aid as our permanent fix, you know what happens when you leave a Band-Aid on for too long? It doesn't look good. It's nasty. You start getting awful infections. So use it wisely, use it respectfully, and really, since the issue is not this missing chemical in your child's brain, I would say the first thing that needs to be done is finding out why your child's struggling and really trying to hit the target on that. Working with the teachers, with parents, with an entire staff of people if you need to, but trying to not rely on the medication as your fix, because it can't do that.
Yeah, I love everything you were saying really resonates with me, and I think using it as a part of an intervention, it's not the answer, but it's part of the answer. But I think it is very helpful, and I think something that I wish more parents were like, not just using it as, I think some people are using school as a babysitting service, and they use medication as a babysitting service as well sometimes. And just
Oh, sure.
because your doctor is saying that this is what your child needs doesn't necessarily mean that that's what your child needs. And sometimes it could be
In
something
my
else.
case, all three of them, it was not what my child needed. And like, my children like to talk, as you can see from our conversation today.
Yeah.
And each one of them came back to me with feedback. And I was grateful, because then the youngest one that I had medicated, I stopped his medication real fast. And he landed, so because they do pay a social price very often being on the medication, because they're not able to engage with curiosity.
Right.
It actually, we're talking about curiosity, you and I, and medication is really part of the mechanism of action there, is reducing curiosity of their environment, and therefore they get hyper-focus on what's in front of them. So that reduction in curiosity, they pay a social price for.
Yeah. And I think those how to deal with those things, if a child's not going to have their own innate behaviors of how to challenge themselves, how to deal with things because of the handicap that medication can bring upon them, it could be detrimental long term in that sense. But let's on that point of long term over here, I'm curious, what are the long term effects of, let's say, if a child's going to go untreated when it comes to an ADHD diagnosis, and how it's going to manifest itself both regarding their own behaviors, whether it's in a school system, socially, maybe even psychologically in the long term, if things are not going to get treated at a young age.
So when we're talking about untreated, you're talking about like the kind of interventions you and I would do, or are you talking about medication?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. To the first part, not medications. I think medications is a separate category, and you and I could probably talk about medications for a lot longer. I just wanted to touch on it just regarding the concept of it, and I want to make it clear to everyone listening here. we're not against medications, and there could be many situations where medications could be of benefit as long as it's a part of what the child needs and not the answer for what the child needs. And I think it's important to make sure that, people are understanding that. But going back, to my question, when it comes to ADHD not getting treated in a intervention way, I'm curious of
Right.
what are the long-term effects of something like that.
So I work with parents of young children as well as adults themselves who, realize that they had ADHD at an older age, or they're struggling within their marriage, things like that. And what I've seen as the untreated, meaning they never learned proper habits and skills, like organization, like communication. They didn't learn those things like we were talking about with the charts, but there's so many other ways of doing that. They didn't learn to connect in an emotional way or a social way with friends, with their family members. And they also didn't learn how to set up systems of success, a schedule, a calendar, a routine, a start-stop mechanism. When they didn't learn all of those things, then they drag all of their ADHD symptoms into adulthood. When they have learned those and they've learned, let's say they were in a household where the parents were not accommodating because they had ADHD and made them clean their room and made them make a schedule and insisted that they study even though it's hard, but they helped them by having them get up and do jumping jacks once an hour or studying with them or helping with a tutor. There's so many ways that our very bright kids with ADHD can learn extremely well. So when parents we're not over accommodating, but yet we're understanding. And then I think the over accommodation weakens our children, doesn't teach them to be vibrant, capable people
Resilience
and successful. The resilience, exactly, and leadership and being able to just get out there and just be successful in this world. So we're not coddling at all. And so those are the people I landed up seeing, the ones who did not learn skills and did not become resilient. And they're the ones also who were told that they had to be perfect. Like they were cursed with all of these, you're not good enough. You're being put in boxes of you're the ADHD kid, you're the troublemaker, you're this, and they haven't been able to pull themselves out of it. So therefore, yeah, if you don't start helping children right away from the beginning with routines, with schedule, with emotional intelligence and resilience, then they'll end up seeking help later on after their marriage is on the rocks and they're jumping from job to job and feeling pretty awful about themselves. I would definitely say that we need to, and parents often ask me, I teach college. I teach in a teacher's college, which I love. And my students will ask me, they're like parents of a 2-year-old, and they'll say, well, we're seeing like symptoms of ADHD. I'm like, don't you be diagnosing right now. But they'll ask me, when's the right time to get started? And I say, now, because your child is not ill and doesn't need a diagnosis. Your child is showing symptoms that on the one hand are magical and really fun. And on the other hand, you need to help them direct those beautiful, beautiful behaviors in a way that they can actually use in the future.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love that because I think, in some ways, like we started off today saying, I think we all have a little bit of ADHD inside of us, and even if we haven't been diagnosed with it, but there's a certain resilience and a natural way of growing that we learn how to cope with things. Sort of like a tree, and giving it its environment is going to grow based on where it is and how it's going to climb up, whether it's the side of a house or in between two houses or the side of a mountain. It's going to really, really just take its situation and be the best version of that. And our children are going to be the same way. So if we have that 2-year-old, 3-year-old, or even 8-year-old that are going through things, when we're sitting with them and when they have that support and they can see that there are things that we can do and we can lead a happy and healthy life. And even with, these quote unquote, I think what the world would like to say deficiencies, which I don't think they necessarily are, because like you said, they could be our leaders, our artists, and our biggest innovators. It's us teaching them how, yes, whatever you have, it's part of your recipe for who you are, and that's what we're trying to do. At the same time, we're also in a society that has a school system that has a certain structure, that has a way of doing things, of having to get a certain type of education, and I think a lot of those things can be very important as well. And when parents are dealing with a child sometimes that could show a lot of symptoms and maybe even have a diagnosis of ADHD. Sometimes you have to collaborate and deal with others. And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about the maybe some tricks or skills that parents can have when it comes to dealing with a school system that sometimes may not be as open-minded and as patient with our own children as we are. How can parents go about dealing with that?
Yeah, so I have an entire chapter on that as well because it's that important, the topic. It's the bridge between home and school. And the first thing we have to understand is that these are our partners. The teachers are our partners, and they are spending most of your child's energetic hours with them. So we have to be their allies. And if we're overcritical and we are over demanding or, saying things like, I absolutely will not medicate, things like very, very absolute kind of statements, we lose the teacher. And that's a shame because it's really to the benefit of our children. And I'm speaking from the teacher side of the desk and the parent side of the desk. We need to have that good communication. So that's what we start with. Then we have there's a system that we have that works with the parent and the teacher. There's a certain chart that I use in the classroom with the teacher that the parent is responsible for. So that allows for very smooth daily communication where the parent and the teacher have the opportunity to really write back and forth to each other only positive things. We never ever make our children carry a negative note about themselves home. We have many ways of communicating. You can call, you can send a WhatsApp. Don't make your kids do that. It's not nice. And not only that, it's like permanently written down for them. It causes a lot of not good feeling. But we definitely have different ways that we can invite the parent to set up discipline in the classroom. For example, teachers like to write rules in the classroom that are all positive. And guess what? Our children have a different way of interpreting things. So therefore, they're going to look at these rules and like, well, that doesn't apply to me. Or, of course, I hit him. He was looking at me the wrong way. And it says here that I should use my hands in the right way. And I just did because he was being nasty to me. So I just smacked him because he had it coming and that was the right way. So therefore, it's very important for teachers to make sure that their children understand the rules and understand the consequences. And a huge thing that I learned as a classroom teacher is that if we want our children to behave well in the classroom, they need a few very fundamental things. Our ADHD kids, they come in the first day confused because they're boundaryless. They're looking for the boundary. And if you're flowy and open and loving, always be loving. I remember bumping into a seasoned teacher while I was at the library. We used to go to the library back in the day. I was doing some research and she says, you're a teacher. Well, let me give you some advice. Don't you smile at those kids till Christmas. And I'm like, that's not going to work for me. I really like to smile. But the point is that we need to give them very strong structure. This is where your books go. This is where you go. This is how you leave the room. This is how you come back in. And it's not because we're being anal and needing everything to be exactly right. It's because these children come in scared, and therefore they must test every single boundary until we push back. So don't make them test the boundary. Give them that hug of security of, I know where to be. I know how to do it. I used to have my students come up to the board and write down every day what books have to be taken out. So I didn't do it. They got to come to the board and they knew it because they had a lovely, how we, as a teacher, I'm assuming you weren't a teacher or you're a therapist?
No, I'm a therapist, but sometimes I feel like a teacher.
They're very interchangeable often. But as a teacher, we had to give out our lesson plan to the principal at the beginning of the week. I gave mine to the principal, but I gave it to my students. And they had it in a beautiful, mapped out way where I could teach them flexibility because then they would, if there was a change in the schedule, we can all sit with the schedule and decide how we change it together with their own pencil.
Right.
And I taught them that here's the structure. You want to succeed within the structure. This is the microstructure. This part you can succeed at. Just this class and then just that class. And they got stars and they got checks on their own plan for the week. And they knew exactly what they had to do. So one kid would come up and write on the board. And then the kid with the ADHD who's flying knew that he had to go get those books, and that angered him. Excellent. And then I would say at the end of the day, these are the books you have to put in your backpack. And a kid would come up and write on the board what books you have to put in your backpack. And the kid that's flying is like, thank you. And he puts that in the backpack. And so that structure is magical for these kids.
Yeah.
Absolutely magical. The rules being in their language is unbelievable. And the consequences on the positive and negative are key. And the positive is the most key. When as a classroom teacher, I would hand out these little prize tickets, and we had a sale once a month. On the first of the Jewish month, actually, we had a big sale, and the kids loved it. They were in masses. But because I gave out tickets, I'd walk over and say loudly the compliment, what the kid was getting the ticket for. Everyone around him was immediately like, "Oh, I want that too," and I never had to tell them what not to do. So they followed the rules, and the positive consequences were not just sufficient, they were unbelievable.
Right.
So these are things that we can guide our teachers with. And but the key is work together. You're
Collaborate
on the same team.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
There are so many more ways I want to go over here. We are running out of time, and I have these two important questions that I sort of have like circled here that I really wanted to get to. So I think first, I guess being a little bit selfish in my questioning here, but I think still an important topic is, can you give a little bit of advice to parents, to us that are experiencing feelings of guilt or frustration for how we've dealt with our kids' ADHD diagnosis or undiagnosis, but ADHD symptoms within the house and the social settings?
Yeah, for sure. And this is something that all parents go through. So whoever's feeling guilt, you're in very good company with some incredible parents. That said, the guilt is just going to destroy you. And I think that what helped me pull out of guilt was faith. And I'll explain that. Faith meaning that we have to believe that just as we have been through a journey, and we're still going through a journey from our childhood, from the challenges we had, the things that we went through, we also have to have faith that this is our children's childhood and these are the tests that they're going through. So if we are giving them the message that they're on a journey and everything that they're encountering is going to be something that can strengthen them, then we're part of that.
Right.
Okay, so we didn't understand yet when they were 5 that they were going through this and that something, was difficult for them. They couldn't read, they couldn't write, they weren't making friends properly, or we were being too harsh on them. Whatever it was that we missed is part of their story. And we cannot bubble wrap our children. We have to have faith that just as we have our story, they have theirs, and we're traveling together with them. And if they can see us being okay with the mistakes we made and apologizing for them, what an amazing message we're giving them, that they can also make mistakes and they can apologize. And instead of, when we make mistakes, I'd make this comparison of either falling off of a sidewalk or falling off of a building. So if I make a mistake and I've fallen off of a sidewalk, I could look at it and say, what did I do wrong? What happened? Did I trip? And I could analyze it and grow from it. Don't walk so close to the edge. And I can learn. If I've fallen off a building because I'm so guilty and I can't forgive myself and I'm bad, then all I learned from that is I'm bad. And our children can't grow and we can't grow.
I love that. I love that. I love that example. Scary, but I love that example. But on this lines of having, I guess, communication within self and how to go about things, I'm curious regarding speaking to siblings of a sister or a brother that has ADHD. How can that be approached? And I guess, and like abbreviated version. I'm sure it could be a very, very long topic over here, but like 1 or 2 bullet points regarding how to talk to kids that have a sibling that are going through ADHD.
Okay, so for us in our house, ADHD is called special energy. And what we say is that the person, once again, not disordered, they are they're in their journey and we have to figure out how to help them. And there's 2 messages. One, you must never be their victim, meaning that you don't have to understand that just because your brother is having a hard time with aggression, that you need to be the punching bag. Absolutely not. That's a red line in our home. No way. And the kid needs to understand that so that they're resilient. And the second thing is, since everybody is different, there are areas where you're stronger and areas where she's stronger and areas where you're both weaker. Everyone's working on strengthening their own personal muscles there.
Yeah, I love those 2 points, and I know there's probably a lot more that we can talk about over here. But I know we're sort of running out of time, and I like asking sort of rapid fire questions as we sort of finish up over here. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate this. I think there's so many tidbits over here. I usually have like a page of notes, and I'm already on my 3rd page of things that I've written out, just to sort of, when I'm writing the show notes over here, and how to sort of put things together. But this has been absolutely amazing, and I really, really appreciate it. Hopefully we could continue this discussion, because I think there's so many more points that we just touched on, and many points that we did not touch on. I think when it comes to dealing with the kids with ADHD, and how to go about things within the home and the school system in general. But I'm curious, as you go through the rapid fire questions over here, if there would be a historical figure, not a relative, dead or alive, that you would be comfortable and you would want your kids to have as a babysitter, who would that be?
That is a funny question. Listen, my favorite person in the world is King David, so I would like him, even though he had. There we go, and there's an example. This is the most imperfect human. Maybe that's why I love him so much. But like, I would want my kids to like go on an adventure with King David.
I love it. Oh my God. Yeah. Oh my God. That resonates with me so much over here. So I know you've written 2 books, and we're actually going to have show notes, and we're going to have links to there. But I'm curious, if you were to write an actual children's book based on your parenting experience, what would the title of that book be?
Be curious.
Okay. You took the words right out of my mouth there, but okay, I'll let you have it. If that's would there be a book or a person or maybe a YouTube channel or someone that you would recommend that people can get more information other than yourself on this topic that we've been talking about today?
I have quoted Dr. Jordan Peterson a lot of times. I think that he's spot on with his perspective on raising kids, and I definitely refer to him a bunch. I love the book The Explosive Child, which I highly recommend. It's not a full system, but it's a very, very good intervention for the child's emotional health. So I'd recommend that. And I'm trying to think what else. I mean, I quote so many books in my books, so they're all there, and I love each one of them.
Okay.
But I think that's it for now.
Yeah. Okay. My last question for right now, as we end this version of our talk, if there would be a everyday mundane superpower that you would like to have as a mom that would be helping out with your parenting, what would that be?
I already have a superpower. I can hear everything. No one gets away with anything. I got supersonic hearing, but I would pray for a tremendous amount of patience and just endless. I do have endless love for my children, but patience wears thin sometimes. So my superpower I would ask for would be a tremendous amount of that.
Love that. I love that. Well, this has been absolutely amazing. Well, thank you so much for everything. As we finish up over here, where can people find more about you and the work that you do?
So they can go to my website, which is hyperhealing.org. There's actually 2 very interesting quizzes there. So you can start going in on the journey of discovering what the root causes of your ADHD are. And I love that quiz. I created it myself, and I think it's great. And you can also write me your own personal messages. You can meet me for a free 15-minute consultation. And my books are on Amazon. You can also link to my books through the website. But that's definitely the best. I'm on Instagram and other social media. I have a bunch of free content on YouTube as well as on my website. YouTube is Hyper Healing Mom.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much for everything today. I really appreciate it.
With pleasure. Thank you.